a narration of the slideshow that is linked also in your science work for today. You can watch this video. You can watch it all at once. You can watch part of it and then pause it and go and have a wiggle break and come back. It's about 12 minutes long, which is not super long, but if you feel like you might need breaks, you can watch each section and then pause it and take a break and come back. You can also just check out the slideshow and click the links and see what's going on in there on your own if you feel comfortable reading it on your own. So those are your choices. I will read the whole thing to you here and show you some of the videos and add a little bit of extra information, or you can do the slideshow as well. How all living things have to grow and reproduce. And when animals reproduce and then those offspring grow, that's called a life cycle. Those can be very simple or very complex. Let's talk a little bit about them. So, all animals grow up. Most animals, including fish, mammals, reptiles, and birds, have a very simple life cycle. That means that they are born, they're either born live or they're hatched from eggs, and then they just grow up. The babies don't look that different from the adults. Humans have a pretty simple life cycle. Babies look different from adults, but they still look like humans, right? There's just 3 stages in that life cycle. There's birth or newborn, young, and adult. So this is a Florida panther. It has a simple life cycle. Even though the newborns have that different pattern to help them camouflage or blend in their environment and be safe, you can still look at it and tell that it's the same kind of animal as the young and the adult. So it grows and it changes, but it just grows larger and has slight changes to its patterns and doesn't change its body shape. Amphibians go through metamorphosis. And some of you guys may remember talking about this when we talked about butterflies before. Metamorphosis is the process of changing shape. So, amphibians like frogs and newts go through a different life cycle. It's not simple like mammals. They undergo metamorphosis, which means the process of changing form or a transformation from egg to adult. And they look very different at each stage. They can be born alive from their mother or hatched from eggs. Most are hatched from eggs. And they spend their childhood underwater, breathing with gills. Gills are the same organs that fish have to breathe oxygen out of the water for their whole lives. Amphibians, which is a word that means on water and land, start their life breathing from gills and change form to breathe with lungs. When they grow into adults and move to the land, they breathe with lungs. So a frog is a life cycle that I think we're all pretty familiar with. They have 4 stages in their life: eggs, tadpole, metamorph, and frog. The egg is the first stage of the life cycle. A frog lays several thousand at one time. They are covered in a jelly coating. Eggs are laid in water or a wet place. A big clump of eggs is called a frog spawn. Since the clump is so big, not many creatures will eat them or not eat them all. The eggs will hatch after 21 days. 21 days is 3 weeks. 3 times 7 is 21. So here's a life cycle of a frog. You can see the eggs there in their big clump, and they hardly look like frogs or even tadpoles at all. Here we're going to see the eggs hatch. So in this video, we start out with the eggs, and they look just like tiny black dots. Watch what happens. So they're going to start moving and jumping all around and changing. And so as they grow and get ready to hatch inside the eggs, and you can see that happening, the little froggy embryos moving and twitching and changing until they become tadpoles that are ready to hatch. You can see the gills forming. Little froggies jumping all over the place to become tadpoles. They're developing their tails so that they can swim in the water. This, of course, is time-lapse. It's speeded up. Remember, this takes 3 weeks, 21 days, the whole process. So someone filmed this and speeded it up, and they're hatching, and here they come. Look at them. You can see their little feathery gills there on the sides and their tails to help them swim through the water. And that's how that process happens. So after that 21-day period, you have a tadpole that's swimming around the water. It attaches itself to weeds in the water and it quickly becomes a tadpole that's able to swim around on its own. That's what a tadpole might look like. Different types of frogs or newts or salamanders might have tadpoles that look a little bit differently, but this is the general body structure. In some ways, they look a little bit like fish, but they also look different. You can see its little mouth is made for just sucking little bits of decaying plant parts and debris from the pond floor. Um, and it can swim around using its little tail. It begins to change after about 5 weeks, and now that process is shorter or longer depending on the species. It starts to grow hind legs, which are followed with front legs. Their tails become smaller and lungs begin to develop, preparing the frog for its life on land. Occasionally, they wiggle to the surface to breathe in air, and they have to have access to land once they start breathing air. The tail becomes larger, and now it becomes possible for the tadpoles to run and catch food. This seems out of order. I should probably make a change there. So here we go. Oh, I see. Yes, the tail becomes more like a newt tail briefly, but it's going to absorb up into his body. Um, as he becomes more, well, frog like. So the front of this guy looks like a frog, but it still has a tail, and tails don't have frogs. I mean, frogs don't have tails. So 11 weeks after the egg was laid, a fully developed frog with lungs, legs, and no tail develops from the water, emerges from the water. This frog will live mostly on land with occasional swims. The tiny frogs begin to eat insects and worms. Eventually, it will find a mate, and the whole process begins again. So frogs, if you've ever held a frog, you know that it has kind of slimy feeling skin, and salamanders are the same way. Toads are not. Toads have drier, rougher skin and spend more of their life on land. But animals that have that slimy feeling skin need to get in water to kind of refresh themselves. And you can look at this little frog and see that he has that moist kind of skin that needs to be kept that way to make him healthy. And here's a picture showing the entire life cycle of a frog. Pulmonary breathing means breathing with lungs, if you're wondering about that. And that shows the whole cycle that we just talked about. So butterflies are one that we're familiar with too. I think we know a lot about butterflies and they're so pretty. I think you know that they're my favorite. Like frogs, butterflies have a four-stage life cycle: egg, caterpillar, chrysalis, and adult. The eggs are laid on the leaves of plants. The coolest thing about butterfly eggs is that if you look close enough at them, you can actually see the caterpillar growing inside. The eggshells are clear, and so you can kind of see them in there. It's so tiny, you have to look really hard. Those are some butterfly eggs. And so as the caterpillar begins to develop, you can see his little head and everything inside of there. The second stage is called larva. We call those caterpillars. When the egg finally hatches, the larva emerges. The caterpillar doesn't stay in that phase for long. Mostly all they're going to do is eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat. In fact, as soon as they eat, they hatch, they eat the leaf that they were born on, and they eat the eggshell and everything. They have to eat and eat so that they can grow very quickly. When a caterpillar is born, they're extremely small. You can hardly see them. When they start eating, they instantly start growing and expanding. Their exoskeleton doesn't stretch or grow, so they grow by molting, which means shedding the outgrown skin several times while it grows. And insects have exoskeletons. They don't have bones inside their bodies. Their structure, and for caterpillars, it's a very soft one, is all on the outside. So this is a caterpillar. That's a monarch caterpillar, which is my personal favorite. And there later in the week, we're going to be checking out my virtual monarch classroom to see our school caterpillars um, growing and changing and developing. And so this is going to show us a caterpillar hatching from his egg, which is super, super cool, I think. And it's something we don't often get to see. So this is so tiny, it's enlarged many times. And you can kind of see him eating his way out of his tiny, tiny eggshell. Here he comes, emerging from his egg. The video is a little bit blurry. I'm sorry, probably because whoever filmed it zoomed in so close. But there's that caterpillar just coming out of his eggshell. And he's going to come out and immediately start eating everything around him as soon as he can emerge. It's hard work for the little guy. There he goes. Stretching out, stretching out. This is also speeded up, of course, to make it a little faster to see. So he's like super fast. Here he comes out of the eggshell. emerging, wiggling out his entire body. And there he goes, ready to start eating and growing larger. So the third stage is the pupa or the chrysalis. For butterfly caterpillars, they become a chrysalis. They actually shed off their skin to create that. As soon as a caterpillar is done growing and they have reached their full length and height, they form themselves into a pupa, also known as a chrysalis. This is different than a cocoon, and if they would become a moth, they would weave a cocoon. But that's not what butterfly caterpillars do. From the outside of the pupa, it looks as if the caterpillar may just be resting, but in the inside is where all of the action really is. Inside of the pupa, the caterpillar is rapidly changing. And so you can see the process there. The caterpillar actually sheds his skin off to become the chrysalis. I think of it as being, oh, I wanted to show you the video, but my thing popped up down here. There are videos in our Monarch classroom that you'll see later this week. By the time the pupa has finished the tissue, limbs and organs of the caterpillar, they have all changed. So every single part of that caterpillar has completely changed. Its tissue, its limbs, its organs. That means every part of its body has changed from caterpillar to butterfly. When it emerges, it's a butterfly. The wings are soft and folded up against their body. After about 3 to 4 hours, the butterfly will flap its wings and it will master flying. That's an amazing process to see. And there are some videos of our butterflies that came from our garden in the Monarch classroom that you'll be seeing later this week. Butterflies immediately start looking for a mate, and then the process starts all over again. And so there's a process of a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. There. And there's the life cycle. And again, there's videos of every stage of this, including them coming from their chrysalis and forming a pupa on our Monarch classroom, which is super neat. So what have we learned? Thinking about all the things we just learned about panthers and frogs and butterflies, can you identify a similarity between all three? Or maybe a difference between them? What do you think about life cycles based on all of this? And it gives directions here for a life cycle mobile, something that you can make and put up at home. This is not a must do because it calls for some time, certainly, and some materials that you may or may not have at home, but it might be a fun and cool thing for you to do. And I'm going to put a link to this presentation on the slide with this video so that any of you guys who would like the directions to this or to see some of the videos that were on the slides, either that I did or didn't show, you can check those out later if you would like to. So that is life cycles. I hope that you guys learned something and found something cool. Check out the slides later on your own to remind yourself of all the things that we learned and check out some of the cool videos, and stay tuned for the virtual Monarch classroom with updates on all of our beautiful butterflies grown in the garden, growing milkweed and flowers that were planted there and the beds built by downtown school students. I think it's really amazing. Hi, guys. Investigate the virtual Monarch Lab, which has a lot of different things that you can investigate. When you click on the Monarch enclosure, every time you see a link like this, see ours here, you get to see that stage in the life cycle of the monarchs. The monarchs in our school garden that I've been watching, which is really, really special. Each one of these books will be read aloud to you. There's an interactive butterfly life cycle that you can explore yourselves. You'll have to enable Flash Player like I just did. That's okay to do. And you can drag and put the different parts in that life cycle. And you can just, there's so much more. Everything is clicky so that you can investigate all the different parts of that lab. So you've got that to investigate later in the week. You can go back through this video and watch it again, and you can investigate the slides and see a few more videos that I didn't show you. I hope that you enjoy it, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on life cycles.